The Dimp Digital Network presents the DDT WrestleCast.
Apps here from the Dimp Digital Network. Welcome to the DDT WrestleCast. I'm joined by Paper, and we're going to review SummerSlam 1992. Paper, how you doing?
Woo!
He's not on the card, is he? Really? Not wrestling.
He's not wrestling, but he's there.
He's lurking.
He does lurk, and no spoiler. Well, I guess this podcast is all spoilers, but and if you haven't watched it from 1992, then you know, God help you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm good. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah. I mean, how excited are you to review this event in 2020? So what's that? 28 years on?
Oh, massively. Like it was the event that introduced me to wrestling. I think I mentioned on another podcast we've done, but it was the big thing that sort of opened my eyes to that then WWF or wrestling as a pro wrestling as a sport or entertainment. And and I've dipped in and out over the years in my love and watch of wrestling. But yeah, this is the card or the event that kicked all that off.
Yeah, what is that? What made you pick this? Is because I kind of let you pick the first episode, because I've watched all of these quite recently, and I thought, well, if Paper's up for doing it, I'll at least let him start off the pick of what events we could possibly cover, and then I think we may be doing something at the end where we present four options and there'll be a poll going out for the audience to decide. But 92, what's the reason behind that, other than perhaps it's the one that kicked it off for you, or is that just it?
Oh, there's a load of things. There was like I hadn't gone back to 92 in such a long time, and I knew like a bunch of the results, but like how they happened, how they got there, was still just a bit vague, and I just equally, having not watched wrestling for a long period of time, and just recently picking it back up with AEW, AEW, should I say? I was not AEW, Elite Wrestling, the wrong way around. Was I just wanted to go back and just think, what was it like back then in comparison to now? Because I've got that sort of fresh thing in my head, and so that was a reason for going back, I guess, as far as I can remember, to see what the difference is between then and now. I didn't want to go, because like we could have easily jumped straight back into somewhere like in the Attitude Era, sort of like the mid to late 90s, because there's some absolutely cracking stuff around then. But I think I wanted to start at the beginning, for me, and my journey started in SummerSlam 92.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting watching him like this, and to be honest, I'm sure we'll eventually get to some Attitude Era stuff, and you'll notice a difference between this and that, let alone between this and today, 28 years later. So it is interesting to take a quick look back. This was held in Wembley Stadium, which sounds mad these days, and I can't believe they've not come back since 92 to do something this big, like to do a major event. It's been, I don't think there's much argument, it's probably the biggest wrestling event that's ever taken place on these shores. And this was the first sort of WWF pay-per-view outside of the North American continent, so they've done stuff in Canada and whatnot. But 80,355 fans packed into Wembley Arena. The gate, about $2.7 million was the gate, which doesn't sound a lot in these days, because that would be, multiply that by 10. But back then, it's a huge amount of money. Are you surprised they've not been back with this sort of magnitude of a card? Because SummerSlam's like one of their top four, along with Survivor Series, Royal Rumble, WrestleMania. There's a market, well, maybe not anymore, but certainly throughout the years where it's been varying in popularity, there's surely a market to do a huge event over in the UK.
Yeah, I think there is room to do a pay-per-view in the UK. I guess my worry is I don't know whether they would be able to get the 80,000 that they have now, mainly because well, maybe there will be at some point in the future, but it just doesn't feel like the sales probably as much there is now, in terms of maybe like the talent and the people buying into that, as it was back then. But I'm very surprised that they haven't tried to come back to the UK and have one of the major pay-per-views, one of the top 4, and try and lace it like they did with all the pomp that you get with sort of a British event rather than an American, because it's a real sort of different sell. I was actually thinking about this yesterday, and I was thinking, 92, they didn't have the internet back then, so you could pre-record, and you wouldn't get spoilers. So for them back in the States, it's a sort of I guess a no-brainer really. You could have a pay-per-view anywhere in the world and then just beam it over there afterwards. I'm not sure if they did or they did it live, but they
a couple
they could
of days later it aired.
Really, and so it's they couldn't get away with that now because social media would be on them. So and my worry would be if they was to hold it in the UK, you would have something that similar happened with the UFC where they had to do it at like 3:00 in the morning. And you their audience is primarily younger children, some young teens and stuff like that wouldn't be up at that time of night, and most parents probably wouldn't allow their children to do that. So I can't see it happening again, and maybe that's why they can get away with the Raw tapings and stuff like that, which I think they do on a yearly basis now. But I just don't think they could get away with it because we in this country don't really have the pay-per-view model. It really makes no sense for them. An interesting fact also about this pay-per-view was I didn't realise, I was watching, I can't remember what it was the other day, but this was the first pay-per-view that the WWF had without Hulk Hogan.
Yes.
So it was a big thing for them. It was a great card, but whether it could happen again, I don't know. I'm not so convinced.
It's probably done. I mean, going back to the UFC comparison, it's kind of like where they are now. They know they can put on an event in London or the UK, and it'll probably sell out regardless of what the card is. So, because it comes over in not very often, I feel like it's a bit similar with WWE, although they're a little bit more active in these areas. It's such demand for it. They don't have to do the big events to grow their brand. They're well established in this country. But interesting. One of the interesting things was that at the time of this event going on and taking place in Wembley, it would be the second largest recorded crowd to attend a pro wrestling event. So it was only trailing Hulk versus Andre the Giant match in 1987, but
98. So it's 5 years they hadn't had a bigger card, bigger attendance in 5 years.
No, it's crazy, really.
Wow.
But it was obviously caught fire, and I think we'll go through it. Maybe the undercard's not as good as what people remember, but certainly there are 2 very good matches at least in here. But we'll go through and pick out which ones of those are. We kick things off with Money Incorporated, which is Ted DiBiase and IRS taking on the Legion of Doom. Hawk, Animal, tag team match, little 12-minute affair. What did you make of this looking back? This isn't really even peak Legion of Doom. They've had their time, believe it or not, in WCW in like the late 80s, but they're still capable of putting on a show here.
I think it was a crowd pleaser to start the show. It was an all-round sort of solid match, and I'll come back to the thing I actually really liked about the match in a minute, but it's I just feel like you had the Legions of Doom, which all you had to do was then walk to the ring in their sort of like spike outfits, and suddenly you've got the crowd going there. There was that's a USP in its own right, and they are babyface, and followed by Money Incorporate, who are so heel. You've got going straight away, and you've got I think it was Jimmy Hart was with Money Incorporated as well. Yeah. So you were on the mic and stuff like that, and so you had a really good probably a match that was could be quite solid, could last a fair whack of time for your opening sort of bout on TV. That, you know, if people were tuning in, they know they're stars that they recognise straight away, and they're going to have a solid match. And then, as I said, the thing I really liked about this match in itself was there was only one pin attempt in the whole match, which got the 3 count, which was something you just don't see now, especially on a match that's gone 12, 13 minutes. To only see one pin attempt was for me was just sort of like blew my mind a little bit, and think, oh cracky, how far things.
Yeah, it's mad because most of the time there'll be a pin attempt for a move that's never got a 3 count ever, and you kind of think, why are you going for that? They should make the pin more about going for it once they've hit a big move, but nowadays everyone kicks out of everything, and you know, you don't know where the 3 count's gonna come from. But Legion of Doom go over. Ted DiBiase, when I was watching, like I watched a cluster of older events, I kind of picked him out as someone who I hadn't seen much of in my younger days, but looking back now, I thought he was really good. I don't know if you got the impression of who like the worker or the biggest technician is out of the 4 that are in the match, but for me, Ted DiBiase is a bit of a, not underrated because he's got a great deal of respect, but for me personally, I remember watching him thinking, you know, he's actually very, very good.
Yeah, no, exactly the same. He did. To be honest, I thought everyone in the match. To be honest, I thought Money Incorporated definitely carried a lot of that match.
Yeah.
They were the younger pairing, and they were putting over the Legions of Doom, who, as you said, were on their sort of way out a little bit. But like they was just. Yeah, the Money Incorporated were definitely the workers in that, but yeah, it's just an all-round good match. And like yourself, Ted DiBiase, I haven't seen so much about over the years, but he, in terms of my memory going back that far, because my memory sort of goes SummerSlam '92 and then sort of skips probably about 5 years straight into the Attitude Era, and so that there's a gap where there's a bunch of great wrestlers that I don't really didn't really get the full flavour, and I reckon Ted DiBiase is definitely one of those.
Yeah, absolutely. We then move on to the second match. This is a really short match. Nails takes on Virgil. And Nails beats him with some weird sort of chin lock or chokehold or whatever it's supposed to be. 3 minutes 15 seconds they've got here in the Wrestling Observer, and then Nails beats Virgil up with Boss Man's nightstick after. This is a bit of a throwaway and a bit of a strange one to be on there, but I guess leading into this there would have been storylines for this match taking place.
Yeah. No, I think they did allude to some of the storylines while they were ongoing. It was a bit of a. It was there as a bit of a filler. I think they had a story ongoing. They probably wanted to give it a bit of airtime and hopefully get a little bit more. See whether something they get more out of it. You know, going into the Raws or the afterwards. But yeah, it did feel like Virgil was pretty much a sacrificial lamb in that match. It didn't feel like they cared too much about having a. And don't get me wrong, the wrestlers probably did care about having a good match, but it felt like the WWF just was like, right, this is going to happen really quick, and Virgil, you're sort of the lamb to the slaughter for this one.
Yeah, absolutely. We then get to see a young Shawn Michaels take on Rick the Model Martel with the gimmick that I always remembered from the tapes. It's always stuck in my mind, but they had promised Sensational Sherry that they would not hit each other in the face. So that threw up some interesting spots. What's it like looking back at someone like Shawn Michaels, who goes on to have a fantastic career, gets stopped by injury, comes back and does amazing stuff still? He's obviously a Hall of Famer and one of the greats to ever do it. What's it like seeing him in 1992 when he's much, much further down the card from where he will get to?
Yeah, for me, like, even though he's that much further down the card, he's on the pay-per-view getting... I would say probably one of the better spots on the pay-per-view, like in comparison to some other people, and it was just interesting to see. It was sort of like, I don't know, that Heartbreak Kid character is just so iconic, and Yeah, it was really, really interesting to see him. More on the other side, I didn't remember much of Rick Martel until I went back and watched it.
Yeah.
This was actually one of the things I really sort of enjoyed about SummerSlam '92 was they were clearly two characters. They were clearly playing this very obvious storyline that you couldn't hit each other in the face. They were both vying for Sherry and had all the Sherry going who she's going to go with during the match, even though she's with like Shawn Michaels, and she was like, oh, maybe she could be with Rick Martel, and then she does the whole fainting and it was just so over dramatized, but I sort of loved it. Like I don't know why, but like you don't get that real sort of like shit funny wrestling anymore. That it's not I say shit, it's not shit, but it's like you don't get that kind of sort of like comedy style wrestling where they're two good wrestlers, but they can have a fun storyline with it, and such a way that it's a double count out, which you never see that anymore. I don't know, but I haven't seen that in a long time. And it was just
AEW still haven't done a count out finish.
Yeah, they haven't. Well, that will happen at some point, because then they've got that one up their sleeve. But
or establish it as a rule at least that it can happen. So you think they'll do it eventually?
Yeah, well, and the thing was, what I enjoyed was the first match was a pin. The second match, I think, was a submission. And the third match was suddenly that this one was the count out. And so already they've had 3 matches with 3 completely different finishes. But yeah, it was. I enjoyed it, and actually out of the stuff so far on the card, it was probably my favourite match, just purely because of the tongue-in-cheek, the Sherry fainting, and then them running after each other, getting soaked with water when she's being carried back, and it's just so sort of like trash TV. It was good fun, and so I enjoyed it, and I don't feel like any wrestler got to show what they're made of wrestling wise, but it just sort of showed both were sort of quite good workers. And obviously we all know where Shawn Michaels ended up, as you said, like Hall of Famer, one of the greatest WrestleMania fights that we've probably ever seen, and the thing is, what we know about Shawn Michaels now, and then you watch him back there, where we know he is this in real life, this sort of obsessed with his career and getting himself forward and stuff like that, and you can see that looking back at this, like as even though it's a character, there's that small part of Shawn Michaels in that character as well, just out of all the stuff that's come out over the years from WWE.
That is interesting, because I listen to JR's podcast, Grilling JR, and every time that Shawn Michaels comes up from the early 90s through to like the late 90s before he went off of his back, his quote is he was a giant pain in the ass. But he was a great in-ring worker. It's another one of those guys that when I was watching, I watched all the pay-per-views about 2 years back. It took me about a year to get through them all, from like 84 to 97 or 6. I can't remember where I got to now. But you see Shawn Michaels slowly filtering in, and he immediately stands out in comparison to what else is going on, as like the way he takes his bumps, the way how athletic he is, and he does a little bit of high flying and just like oozing this charisma. He stands out, especially in this era. But I think you could show anyone this match and not tell them the era it was from, and they'll be able to guess sort of early 90s. It fits right in with sort of the wackiness that the early 90s would have brought.
Yeah, that the hairstyles as well.
Some of them were dreadful. And Shawn's not getting away with that one. He's had some awful haircuts over the years. Then we've got a tag team title match. Now, I don't proclaim to say the Natural Disasters are the best in-ring workers, but I must admit I never forgot them after seeing them on that VHS tape. Typhoon and Earthquake, not the most athletic people you'll see, but they don't half stand out against anyone else, didn't they?
Yeah, no, two great big lads that they haven't got much ring prowess in terms of athleticness, but as soon as one of them touches you or bangs into you or sits on you or whatever, that's going to hurt, and that's what they were sold as. And you're right, you just can't forget them. And it's the first championship match of the card as well.
Yeah.
And we're obviously going back to the era where there is only 3 belts, and I personally I prefer that where there's less. I sometimes think less is more. But yeah, those two really really good, and they you watch it here, and the WWF clearly could have put some other tag team on for that title match, but I was pretty sure that they didn't probably want to take away from what was coming later on, and so they probably just wanted the Natural Disasters to retain that title, and so therefore they sort of gave them a sort of an easier opponent, which you knew they should win, which was going to be a crowd pleaser. And there's so many decent looking back, there's so many decent tag teams they could have been up against, but I felt like they were given sort of maybe the easier role just to keep that card going along.
Yeah, they beat the Beverly brothers in 10 minutes 21. Not going to proclaim it as the best match ever. It certainly wasn't with the guys that are involved. But I still don't forget either of those guys, and they're sort of logged in my head as far as I'll probably the day I die, they'll be there.
Well, yeah, just as a kid, we're just watching that now.
Huge fuckers.
Yeah, you think fucking hell, and like he finishes by basically sitting on it. Well, he just sits on him, and you think as an adult now you can laugh at it, but like as a kid you're like, fuck, imagine him sitting on you. I wouldn't like that and stuff like that. And so yeah, really sort of just their physical appearance really sort of brings to life, how heavy and hard they probably are. Yeah.
We'll then move on to another squash match. We've got Repo Man taking on Crush. Crush defeats Repo Man in 4 minutes 3 seconds with his head crusher, and it's quite apparent here that they're pushing Crush as some sort of Superman type. He didn't sell much. There's in the Observer, Dave Meltzer references that he missed the knee drop off the top rope and that he didn't sell that. He just carried on as normal. But it's a short match at 4 minutes 3 seconds, and it's obviously just there to try and get Crush over. And I think at this time they've got big plans for him, but that doesn't quite materialise as history rolls on. But anything to comment on this short and dominating squash match?
And this is when I was quite drunk when we got to this part of the pay-per-view when I was watching. I had completely forgotten about it and had to be reminded afterwards. I sort of stopped drinking after this and paused it and came back another day to finish the card. But yeah, I think that sort of says everything about this match for me. It was like when you reminded me, I was like, oh yeah, it's the really big hench guy that they're really trying to push. But it was a nothing key match. It was you look at both sort of. Well, the two squash matches so far were nothing matches, and it sort of shows.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think you chose a good place to pause, because after this, we then go straight into the WWF title match, where Ultimate Warrior is taking on Randy Savage. Randy Savage is the champion at this time, and the ongoing story is whose corner is Mr. Perfect going to be in. So you kind of know there's going to be some shenanigans at some point. But outside of that, Warrior, hugely popular, but as many people have pointed out, not the best worker in the world. Relied a lot on his charisma and his gimmick got him so ridiculously over, and people would love him. But if you actually watch his work, it's not the best. Randy Savage, on the other hand, had a great gimmick and was great in the ring, and really these two combined put on what was a pretty good match, other than I didn't like the finish too much because I like it to be some sort of finality to it on a pay-per-view, but you can't have it all.
Yeah, no, and the finish was a count out. I was thinking about this when I was after I'd watched it, and I was thinking how they best, because they effectively have got babyface versus babyface, and they don't want to turn any heel. They want to keep them both babyface, and there's obviously so many ways you can do that, but obviously we got to rewind and go back, and this was sort of like the days when we were first having these big pay-per-views, and they were starting to really sort of roll out, and so maybe the I guess the writing wasn't as what they might do today, but like it gave them a get out of jail card by giving the count out, and because they basically give Ultimate Warrior the win, but Savage retains the belt, so no one's technically losing, and I did feel a little bit cheated by that, if I was being honest. Like you said, when I was a little bit, thought, oh, well, that's sort of unconclusive. Yeah, it was a really solid match, and it probably could have done with a finish. But then I do think back, it's not the match that this pay-per-view is remembered for. And maybe if they had let sort of Ultimate Warrior or Randy Savage win fully and have like the most amazing match, it might have taken away from what was to come on the card. But it was a really, really solid match. I really did enjoy it. I did like the guys coming in, what's he called, Mr. Perfect and Ric Flair, coming to the side of the ring and stuff like that. And you've obviously got the commentary, which was all really nice, tongue in cheek. I forget the commentator. It was Vince McMahon and someone else. But the other guy's sort of gimmick was like he was always on the sort of the heel side. It didn't matter who the heel was. He would always just be on there.
Jesse Ventura, I think.
I'm not too sure, yeah, it was a really good the way they played it, and obviously they've been building this one up for quite some time on all the home shows and going to the ring, and it worked well. Yeah, as I said, I felt a little bit disappointed by the ending because it sort of felt unfinished, but it was a solid sort of 20 odd 5 minutes, and then it was just sort of quickly sort of over with. And I quite like, we've got to remember that, the WWF's key audience is children / teens, especially at this time as well. And so to them to see someone like our Ultimate Warrior and his gimmick is just they just absolutely love it. And and I definitely enjoyed the match.
Yeah, you can't fault Warrior for what he won and how popular he was, because he got over. Like, it's as simple as that. He was popular, so you have to put him in these sort of positions regardless of his in-ring work. Not quite been up to scratch, but it still showed here that he's capable of putting on the good matches with the right opponents, and that's something for the bookers to decide and make sure they pair him up with good opponents that can make the both of them look good. It was Bobby the Brain Heenan who was the commentator with Vince. And yes, Bobby is a legend on the commentary and at ringside when he's allowed to come out. What did you think of Flair and Mr. Perfect coming down? Did you have an idea of who they were going to side with? I mean, in honesty, it just felt like they were there to wreck it regardless. It didn't matter who ended up winning in the end, but they sort of teased by tripping Savage, and then I think he double crosses Warrior, and it just turns out they're just trying to cause a ruckus basically.
Yeah, I thought that was played pretty well. Like, I sort of had an inkling before the match that they weren't on a side. It was because you had two baby faces, and you just knew that probably none of them were going to turn. So because if they were going to turn, that was obviously the time for it to happen. To have Mr. Perfect inside, but I like the way they teased. I like the way they tricked Savage, and like everyone's like, oh, they must be on Warrior's side. And then when they took out Warrior, but then Savage's back's turned and so forth. I think he was like out of the ring when it happened. Yeah. And you're like, oh, and at that sort of stage, you sort of get the inkling, oh, they're there to mess this up. And I think they did a good job. I do like and actually just in general, wrestling, like the wrestlers' awareness of the ring. They know where the camera is, so they'll always stand on the opposite side of the ring, so they're facing the camera and stuff like that. And just little things like that. I just thought I enjoyed it. Yeah,
they made sure that they didn't want to turn either of these, because Warrior grabs the belt and gives it to Randy Savage and helps him up to his feet. So they're making sure that people don't go away thinking, Warrior or Savage, which one of those? But they're clearly still on the same page, other than when Flair and Mr. Perfect come down. Here's a quick excerpt from Dave Meltzer's report from the Wrestling Observer for this match. It says, Warrior has shrunk like crazy. He looked about 225, very much like a taller Brian Pillman, but without the wrestling ability. Considering he looked like this when he came back, then suddenly got noticeably bigger, then shrunk a major amount in just a few weeks, you can't convince me of anything other than he was given special permission to use chemical aids up until a few weeks ago, because he looked exactly like every bodybuilder a few weeks after getting off the juice. So there we go. I think that's probably a fair assessment given what was going on back in the day.
I think that's probably of everyone back in the day, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, everyone's on the gimmick. I thought in my mind, I thought when I watched this that was we were coming up to the big main event match between Bulldog and Bret Hart. But there is another match. It's Undertaker versus Kamala, and this is another match, very short. I think it ends in under 4 minutes. But I always remember it just because Kamala just keeps splashing the Undertaker at the end, and then Undertaker pops up, and Kamala basically runs off scared because he's like, "What the hell have I got to do to put this man down?" But it's a short match. Undertaker wins via DQ. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I when I watched this in my head, for some reason, it was daytime when this match was happening, but obviously it was pitch black, and it was like just before the main. Well, it wasn't the main event. They did class the match before as the main event, but it was pitch black, and all I could remember previously from this was when Paul Bear sort of slams a ring and Taker sort of sits up, and it's like, oh, he's come back to life. I think that's what, just as I remember saying as a kid, going, oh, Undertaker died and he come back to life, and but I didn't realise actually like how much of a poor match it was, like, and that was just that's what I was really disappointed about when I was watching back to SummerSlam '92 was Kamala was just crap, to be honest. It felt like they just got some big guy just to put on like an African mask and not have any sort of, you know, in-ring skill just to be there. And like the DQ was just shit as well. Like it was like this tiny little guy running and just hits him with his hat, and you're like, well, that's done nothing to no one. It's not like he's hit him with a chair or, you know, like really knocked him hard. But and it was just like, well, that's pathetic to stop the match for that. And so I just got, I did fair, watching this back did annoy me a little bit, but I personally was resurrected again when I saw Paul Bear do the bang on and Undertaker. I was like, yeah, and Undertaker's entrance was ace. To even looking back, I can't think of a better Undertaker entrance than that. Just the ring walk was so long, and coming on that car and the music and the entrance was good, but the match was just crap, and it felt like I don't know much about Kamala, if I'm being honest. I don't know if he was around in the WWF long after, or if he was there much before, but it was just it was another squash match, and the only like the other two, it's forgettable. I think the only reason it's not forgettable is because it was Taker, and obviously Taker's a legend, and like his entrance was just probably the best entrance of the night, personally.
No, I mean it's a legendary entrance, the Undertaker, so it's always good to see it, especially back in '92 where it's still like the first version of the Undertaker. So he's wearing like the black and purple, and they're very much playing and leaning heavily in towards the Undertaker gimmick at this stage because it fits in with the time period. But yeah, I mean, it was a short match, terrible match in Dave Meltzer's eyes. He gave it -1 star. So
me and Dave were aligned then. But I did like, and this is why the more I saw was going through, it was back then every wrestler had a gimmick. They were something, if that makes sense. Like even with the VTs, with the Nasty Boys or the Bushwhackers and stuff like that, everyone had a gimmick. And I don't know, that seems to have died a death. I don't know of any. Well, I can't think off the top of my head a wrestler with a gimmick that can get that far now up a roster, as they probably could back in the day. Even like Taker's gimmick sort of died down. If you look at him, and even later on, he's sort of gone more toward. He's lost a lot of that apparel, and people refer to him as Taker rather than Undertaker and stuff like that.
He went through that whole American Badass gimmick where he was a biker and not anything to do with Undertaker. So. Yeah, it certainly goes in peaks and troughs, but it feels like the days of the Undertaker gimmick are slowly fading away or pretty much gone. Although maybe Matt Hardy's trying to resurrect that with teleportation and holograms. Well,
you know, we'll see how we get on. But yeah, even like back then as well, like they could just, you know, stereotypes weren't a problem back then, and they were just Kamala was just a perfect example of them just saying, right, stereotype this guy up, and away you go, get in the ring. And so it's one of those days. But yeah, it was a poor match, but you know, there are some little things in it that are enjoyable.
I'm not against a poor match now and again because it's bound to happen. As long as the poor match is short and inoffensive, then I'm fine with it. So,
which they did on this card.
Yeah,
all
exactly.
The three poor matches were less than 5 minutes, all of them.
Yeah, exactly. So you just gotta. But as long as they're short, I think it's fine. I haven't lost too much time basically watching that. So if it was 15 minutes and that's how it went, and then that's how the finish was, you'd be like, right, that was a pile of shit. And that was a waste of my time, but at 3 minutes 42, you get to see the Undertaker come out. You get to see, the gimmick at the end where he pops back up, and that's all the crowd really wanted at that time. Anyway, I don't think they cared about him seeing the Undertaker win a clean match against Kamala at the time. We then got the main event.
Well, before that, there was the bit, one of the bits I enjoyed most from '92, which was when Rowdy Piper came out and he was on the bagpipes between these two. And this is, I think, what I meant about earlier about talking about like they could have done with the British pomp and that like all that type of stuff. They don't do that anymore. But it was great to see Piper there and on the bagpipes, though I'm pretty sure he wasn't playing them.
Very much doubt it. Yeah.
I thought it was, once again, it was just a really nice gimmick, and it was a really nice thing just to between the two matches in the build up to Bulldog and Bret Hart. I just enjoyed it. I thought it was a bit of fun.
Yeah. So here's a little tidbit about Roddy Piper. Roddy Piper appeared on the show playing the bagpipes. Apparently this was a favour, as there were political reasons regarding Piper getting some kind of Actors Guild card to work in the United Kingdom, as this was a simple way to go about it. There are no plans for his return at this time. So something was obviously going on behind the scenes there, which is probably why he went wrestling. And he just popped back for this. So some behind the scenes bits there. But like you said, he probably wasn't playing those bagpipes. I'd be surprised. If he is, then hats off. That's a job well done. They look fucking hard. Yeah,
but it's, once again, they played to his gimmick, and in the being in the UK and bagpipes galore, Scotland and stuff like that. It was just a nice treat, I thought, between and it's the type of thing that I think wrestling can do really well. It's just the little in betweeny bits that can sell a show sometimes.
Funny thing about Roddy Piper and what his gimmick was, he was Canadian, so he wasn't Scottish. He didn't even sound Scottish. He just wore the kilt.
That's all you need to be Scottish these days.
Yeah,
the kilt,
exactly.
And you're in.
He didn't even try and put on an accent. So he didn't go full hog on that gimmick, but it worked, and a great work and a great promo, which I'm hoping we'll get to see some of those in full flight at some point in the future. But Bulldog takes on Bret Hart, and it's obviously this is like an intra-family feud as well, because you've got Diana, who's Bret's sister, who's married to the Bulldog. So there's always a bit of like they're constantly referencing or who she want to win, her brother or her husband, all this sort of good stuff. And interestingly, this is the main event. Not surprising considering Bulldog is part of the match. Obviously, we're in the UK here for this, so it's one of those things where they put the hometown hero on last. But it is an Intercontinental title match, not a World Championship match. And this is at the stage where the Intercontinental belt kind of meant something before they pissed it all away. And we were talking off air about AEW and the TNT Championship they've created. And he was a bit like, well, I don't need a second shitty belt. But here's an example of where the second shitty belt can actually be elevated to a decent prestige and is main event in SummerSlam.
Yeah, the Intercontinental belt, I always look back with a lot of fondness. It was won by wrestlers that deserved to win it, that you just knew probably weren't going to get a push within the next sort of year or so towards the sort of main belt, because you can only have so many people around that main belt at a given time, and storylines around it, and it just, so therefore you can keep and there are some really good wrestlers further down that roster, and you can really get them, and it does feel like it's also a nice way for a wrestler to get a step up before making it, if they want to then try and give them a push later on towards the world title. And it can get pissed up if they start giving it to people that don't deserve it, or shitty comedy crap happens with it and stuff like that, and then it sort of loses its sort of integrity.
That's what's happened though in recent times with the Intercontinental belt, and not even in recent times, for decades now. It's gone from main eventing something like SummerSlam, where it's one of their top events of the year, to just being not even an opener sometimes, just being involved in stupid squash matches. Like the last time it changed hands in the WWE recently was in a 3v1 handicap match, and one of the three won it. And it's like, well, what are we doing?
Really?
It's so far from what they're doing here, isn't it, with the Intercontinental title?
Yeah, there's so much prestige around it, and it meant, it just meant something. I don't know, it's hard to, I guess, put it so much into words, but like, just yeah, and then that's what I guess what we referring back to the AEW, like they like, we're not too sure about the naming of the belt, but if they just don't fuck it up and they give it to people that deserve the belt, or deserve a push that can't get a push anytime soon towards the main belt, or around that sort of top five, outside of that top five, because they've got the rankings there in the AEW. If they can do it for people outside the top five, but are really good, and people would like, then they're good. If people like Orange Cassidy win it, to me that sort of starts the slippery slide to it sort of being a bit of a worthless gimmick belt.
So you're hoping that someone like Colt Cabana can win it and really give the TNT Championship its prestige and put it on there with the likes of the Intercontinental title from the early 90s.
If Colt Cabana wins it, I'm out of AEW. I quit. There are plenty of good people, and there's plenty of young, good people that deserve it as well. Like, and we've gone well off topic here of SummerSlam, but you've got MJF, you've got the Codys, you've got the Darby Allins, you've probably got people like Pac who are probably going to fall out of that top five soon. That probably deserve that push, but Colt Cabana can just I just don't like the gimmick. Sorry, Colt.
No. But it's one last thing on AEW, and we'll get back to the main event. But Pac would be a great first champion, but I think with the lockdowns and the travel restrictions in place because of COVID-19, I think he's stuck over here. So he can't get out to AEW to work at the moment. So that's a bit of a pain. The timing's not great. If I was them, I would have personally pushed this back until things were a bit clearer, because you want that to be one in front of a crowd. I'm not sure by the end of May they're going to be able to run Double or Nothing, which is where it's meant to be, the finals taking place. But we'll see. We'll see how it pans out, and we'll definitely have a separate chat about AEW in the near future.
Yep.
Bret Hart, Bulldog, talk to me. I mean, Bret Hart, one of the best to ever do it, and Bulldog, one of your favourites probably because he's British.
Yeah, well, Bret Hart was his line, the best there was, the best there is, and the best there ever will be. I was actually watching the Stone Cold Skull, whatever his podcast, where Bret Hart on Broken Skull, that's it. Then he was on like a couple of weeks ago, and Bret Hart talks about like he wanted to be involved in classic matches, and this was just one of, I guess he mentioned about 5 matches and under that term, this was one of them, and it definitely was. It was such a good match, and even being in the UK, once again, it was 2 babyface. The SPAC storyline was really good, really interesting, really well played, and even in the arena, there were a lot of people cheering on Bret Hart as well, and there was sometimes where he had a bit of a boo, because obviously you're going to have a bigger crowd towards Bulldog, but it was just a really, really good fight or match. And Bret Hart and Davey probably have worked with each other on and off, and just practiced with each other for years outside. So I'm not surprised it leads to being probably the best match of the card, and it's tipping hats to the WWE for not sticking the main heavyweight title, or not heavyweight, the main world title as the top build event, and actually going, well, look, this will really be an amazing way to finish the night off, to have the hometown favourite against another one of our all-time greatest wrestlers. And so it was really, really good. I really enjoyed it, and it was. I even went off and bought, I don't know why, I went on eBay and bought I don't know if you remember, a Hasbro mini figure of Bulldog.
Oh yeah.
So that'll be arriving in the next couple of days, just to sit on next to my computer. I was like, I'll have that. £6 done.
Yeah, he's certainly a legend over on these shores, and he had great matches during his time, and this was one of them. And it obviously helps being in there with such a good technician like Bret Hart, who no doubt would have been calling the match and running Davey through it. But still, the heat in the match is unbelievable. The crowd, bearing in mind this is probably at the back end of 3-4 hours, they've probably had a few dark matches, and they've been sitting there all day. It looked like it was baking hot in the afternoon, then it's got to the night. But when it came time for the main event, the crowd were just as lively, if not live, as they've been all night. And that really, in my eyes, that always helps a match, is seeing the live reactions of the crowd. And these guys put on a great performance. We had some good spots in there. Hart kicking out of the power slam, and Bulldog managing to get out of the sharpshooter. And it all culminates with Bulldog winning clean with a bit of a flash pinfall. But he gets the cradle and gets it to win the Intercontinental belt. Probably Bulldog's career highlight, really, when we look back at what he went on to do.
Oh, massively. He's 100% his biggest moment, I would say, in the whole of his wrestling career. And I guess stepping away from it, it's nice to see that he's being inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Yes.
Of, I don't know, in the next month or so. I can't remember when it is. It's WrestleMania.
Yeah, it'll be this weekend.
Yeah, and so that's long overdue. And it was just fantastic. I don't know what to say about it, apart from it was just one of those matches that I just really enjoyed. Both seemed to work really hard. I like the way that they played it. Like, Bret Hart was the better wrestler, and they played it to that. They told the story that Bret Hart was getting over most of that match, and you thought, well, it's only going to be a matter of time. There was lots of kick out, lots of heart, and then I like the fact that Bulldog won it sort of not sneakily, but quickly rolled up and turned it an offense from defense into offense, and just won it quickly there. And I just thought that sort of told a nice story to say, hey, Bret Hart probably the better wrestler, but on the day Bulldog toughed it out and just pulled it out of the hat right at the end there. And I thought that was a really nice way to win it. And obviously, the memories from that for me as a kid was Dana standing in the middle of the two of them, holding their hands up high after that, and like sort of that sort of family that they played on for that story. And it was it was a really, really good finish to what was a really sort of solid, nice card.
Yeah, it's a great main event. I always tend to wait, whether I enjoyed a pay-per-view more so on how good the main event was, because I think it's important that the biggest match of the card delivers. So a bad main event can really drag down a card, and a great main event can drag up an average card into the good realms. And this was one of the great ones, and it's interesting to hear that Bret had picked this out all these years later as one of his matches to talk about. So he obviously holds it in high regard as well. What score would you give best match on the card? I think it's obvious, but there's probably a case for just two matches in my view. But who would you say the best match on the card goes to?
Now's versus Virgil.
Yeah, I thought that as well.
No, I think just...
That won the worst match poll in the Observer, by the way.
Oh, really? So I picked out the worst there. That was sort of the point, I guess. No, it was Bulldog versus Hart. And actually, I don't even think it was that close. I just think it was just an all-round better match. I think both...
satisfying finish.
The crowd
no
were
silly
just
bollocks.
Amazing. You could just... The commentary on it was just really well done. It was just... Yeah, it was just the finish to it, the fireworks and everything, the lead into it. It was nearly a perfect match, I would say. There's obviously a few things to that, but it was definitely more of if I was to score it, it would be a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, absolutely. In the Observer poll, that won best match, Bret Hart v Bulldog, and I would agree with that. 76% that got. So that was, quite a landslide. Overall for the event, what would you give the score to the entire event? You can go up to 10 and use 0.5 decimals if you wish to do so.
for the event itself, I would probably say it was a good, for me, I would probably, I'm just trying to, this is on the spot question. If you
You'll be prepared next time.
Yeah, if you was to ask me before I'd watched it in my head, it was probably a 9 out of 10. But I think after rewatching it the other night and going back, I'd probably lower that by a 0.5 and go to an 8.5 out of 10. And actually, in my head, I'm sort of somewhere between 8.5 and 8, probably more like an 8.2 or something like that. Just because I felt that there was a couple of those squash matches that sort of let it down a little bit, and there was some of the endings, which some of the matches felt a bit cop-outy and a little bit weak. But overall, in terms of sort of like production and what your takeaway and remember, and could I go back and watch it again? Yes, I would. There's just a lot. There's just a lot of small things throughout that whole event that I just remember that I think I'll hold quite dear, and I think a lot of people that watched it back in the day will do as well. So for me, I'd say 8.5, but if I could go a little bit lower, I'd probably say 8.2.
Yeah, I'd agree with 8.5. I think the main event is good enough to warrant it that. So a couple of 8.5s for SummerSlam 92. You've got to factor in the nostalgia factor, otherwise there's no point doing these. It's the whole point of being able to go back and enjoy this stuff. That's for sure. The Observer readers, they had a thumbs up rating of 73%, thumbs down of 15%, and in the middle 11%. So fairly close to a very high margin of people who enjoyed the event itself. 8.5, that's SummerSlam 92 in the books. So you mentioned at the start of the show that you was interested to see the comparison from this event to modern day stuff, in particular what we watched with AEW, and we've recently had Revolution, which was a pay-per-view that AEW put on at the end of February. How did this compare? Anything that you picked out from what you liked on either side and disliked on either side compared to what they have done or are doing now?
Do you know what? For me, the thing I like back then to now is that there was clearly a couple of fights that really went hard, or clapping matches, should I say, that really went hard, that really went over the top, and they were really made to be these big matches. Whereas it now just feels like in every pay-per-view, each individual match is out for themselves, and it's never like about the card. It's more about each individual match they have to try and be the best match, even if they're on first, second, third, fourth, fifth. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I loved things like the Darby Allin Sammy Guevara match and stuff like that. But every match on the Revolution card, barring sort of the women's match, was a fantastic match, and I absolutely loved the card and I really enjoyed it. But sometimes it takes away from some of the greater matches on that card because everyone's doing dives through the ropes, everyone's doing somersaults off the top ropes, and I'd like them just to calm it down a bit, maybe in some of those early matches, and say, hey, let's give it to the guys that might be on. We want to highlight this match and the main event or something like that. So I'd like a bit more of that and just less kickouts and stuff like that. But equally, I do enjoy some of these top rope, high devil daring things that the Hardy brothers brought into effect with when they came into the WWF, and they that's changed the game, and it's just it's a different ball game now. I don't know whether 1992 wrestling could work. However, you only have to look at MJF to think, well, he gets a lot of his influence from the 80s, the early 90s type wrestling, and he's doing quite well. So maybe some other people should take a look at that and think, well, maybe let's try and see if we can bring back some of this early 90s, late 80s style of wrestling and see where they can get them.
Yeah, it's funny because we didn't slate the MJF and Cody match, but we certainly picked it out. I picked it out as a bit of a disappointment in comparison. And I think you go back to something like an event like this, and that would have been one of the better matches.
Yeah.
And because we're not used to seeing that style of match, I think it just kind of shocked us a little bit, because in amongst and sandwiched between all these other great matches, that it was always going to be tricky to sell something like that. But I think watching these will give us a bit more of an appreciation of when those matches take place in modern times, because like you said, it's as good as it is watching all the high flying and the athletic stuff. Sometimes just a good old school wrestling match is what's required. Final question for you: would you rather watch Nails v Virgil again or Chris Statlander versus Nyla Rose again from Revolution?
Niles versus Virgil, just because it's over quicker.
That's what I was going to say. That's my answer. It's about half the time. It's less than half. It's more than half the time, I should say.
Yeah,
but...
if they're going to have a poor match, just don't waste my time. As I think you said earlier, and so
Yeah,
they
exactly.
didn't. So I'll take that.
Okay, so we've still got Nyla Rose and Chris Statlander as one of the worst we've seen and wouldn't want to see again. I mentioned at the start that we were going to look at doing another event, and you came up with the idea of perhaps putting it to the audience, putting out a Twitter poll for a week or a few days to let them decide which event we should watch and review next. So I've taken it upon myself to pick 4 events, and these are going to go up on our Twitter account at DDT WrestleCast, and you'll be able to find it also at the Digital Network. That will be retweeted out in that as well. So have a look and see which of these 4 you would prefer. So we've got WrestleMania 10, Royal Rumble 1992, so same year of what we just watched, In Your House 16, Canadian Stampede, or WrestleMania 8. So a poll will be going up very shortly on our Twitter account for you guys to vote which event we're going to watch next and review. So there we go. I think that's it. Go on.
Am I allowed to influence people, or do I have to keep my opinions?
Of course you can. No.
Well, if people are listening, I think I would like to watch the Stampede. I've been watching a bit of Bret Hart recently, and I'd really want to learn a little bit more about that one. So yeah, if you like me, vote Stampede. If you don't, I guess we're not watching that one.
The spoiler is they're all pretty good events in my eyes. I think WrestleMania 8 will be the sort of oldest one, but 10 is good, 92 is good, Canadian Stampede's good.
It's all pre-attitudes. We're still on pre-attitudes.
So I think when was Canadian Stampede? I think Canadian Stampede was 97. So it's right on the cusp.
Yeah. It was 96, 97 was Bret Hart versus Stone Cold, I think, in WrestleMania, which I can't remember which one it was, but that was when Bret turned heel and Stone turned babyface, which is probably classed as one of the greatest matches as well.
Yeah, so that I'm sure WrestleMania 13 will appear on these lists at some point for people to choose from. But WrestleMania 10, Royal Rumble 92, In Your House 16, Canadian Stampede, WrestleMania 8. The choice is in your hands. So get on Twitter and vote for that. I think that's it, Paper. So thanks for joining us on this inaugural edition of the DDT WrestleCast. You have the honour of being on the first DDT WrestleCast episode. Apart from the launch episode, that's just me talking, explaining what it is. So this is the first proper one. So there you go. You will forever hold that record.
Even if I'm sacked off next time.
Well, someone else that does it.
Well, yeah.
If I had my way, it wouldn't be you, but you take what you can, don't you, in this life?
the fans will start listening to this podcast and go, he has no idea what he's talking about. So I do apologise if you've made it this far and think he's talking a load of crap. Half the time I am. I just, I'm just watching these things back and just trying to say it from, I guess, someone who doesn't really know the ins and outs of wrestling that well, but is still enjoying it.
Exactly. Well, that's a good spot to be, because it offers a different perspective for sure. I don't know what I'm talking about either. I just read up on stuff and copy it. But that's it. DDT WrestleCast in the books. Everyone, if you are listening, subscribe to this podcast, or if you want to listen to our variety podcast, it's the DIMP Digital Network. But just DDT WrestleCast if you want your wrestling content. This is where it's going to come from. Nothing more for us to say apart from thanks for your time and ta-da.
This was a Dimp Digital production.